Hello and Happy New Year, I guess, is the first episode of TEQ. I'm your host, Carolina Milanesi, and we have been to CES and are alive to tell the story. I think CES is such a hard show for many different reasons, from your feet, because you walk miles, from a lack of sleep, but most of all, for somebody who's been as many times as I have, is also a hard show to try and stay excited about the market and really kind of keep your level of skepticism at bay. And so, to help me with that, today I have invited an amazing creator called Jacqueline Dallas, who is better known for her YouTube channel called Nothing But Tech. She is a 22-year-old woman CEO, as I like to say, and creator. And she focuses on really looking at tech and the impact that tech has every day on our lives. I met her at WWDC this past June during a lunch around sustainability. And I love her thoughts and insights and her passion for sustainability. What I find about her videos is how relatable what she says is to mass market consumers. I love the passion. I love the simple level of production that makes it more real in a way. So not overproduced. And I'm not the only fan, because Jacqueline has more than 200,000 subscribers on YouTube, 25,000 more followers on X or Twitter, if like me, you still call it Twitter, and 15,000 more on Instagram. What I find endearing is that she started when she was 13, explaining tech to her grandma and doing videos to explain, how to tackle certain technology challenges. I really hope that today, as I welcome her to the show, she won't feel like she's talking to grandma. Welcome, Jacqueline, to the show.
You're gonna make me tear up. That was the sweetest intro ever. Thank you so much. I'm so honored to be on here, get to talk to you. That lunch was amazing. I feel like such a special moment where Apple's one of the biggest brands in the world, and they obviously come out with products, and it's so exciting. But then to actually hear about the fact they care about their sustainability and environmental impact was amazing, and it was so great to meet you. That was like the highlight for me.
Oh, bless you. I'm going to have to ask with the obvious question to start. How was your first CES?
I was stoked. So I remember I saw on Twitter, like, people that have like been a bunch of times, like, oh no, CES is coming. Like, the feet are going to be like all the things that you just said that are very true. But I've never been, so I was so excited. And it lived up to the hype, I would say. Like, there were a lot of cool things. John Deere had a sick booth there that was like tractors, and they were showing cotton production. But they not only like showed the tech, but then they had sweatshirts in the booth that were made out of the cotton from the booth, which felt like a cool touch. So that was really cool. There was like a folding TV. I feel like it's just like seeing like consumerism a little bit like at the peak levels, but also just like innovative tech and like this optimism, like hopefully it will work out, which is cool.
I agree. I mean, there was a lot of exciting stuff, as always. I think the skepticism from my side comes in always either by looking at something like, oh, this is cool, but from a business perspective, it doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
And or, oh, I've seen this like 3 times and it hasn't worked, right?
100%.
But
yeah, I think that's like the flying car thing, right? Like every year, like someone brings a flying car and we're like, okay, but like, how would that work? Like, are people going to be flying? Like, already with driving, there's accidents. Now suddenly there are people in the sky. Like, what are the steps? But I don't know. Some of that stuff is just like cool to see, because I feel like we need the people that are like delusionally optimistic, because then it will trickle down to being like good tech, versus if we start out like, oh, nothing's possible, and then we'll never get there.
Oh, absolutely. And I think I said this when I turned 50, that, you know, a lot more and more as I grow older is actually not targeted at me. And so as as an analyst or a creator, you need to have that mindset of, okay, just because it doesn't fit you, it doesn't mean that it's going to be successful.
What was like something that you saw? Oh no.
No, go ahead.
What was something that you saw that like you don't think fits you, but you think will be successful?
One, and is not age related. There
Okay.
was a smart nail varnish robot thing.
Okay.
And I was like, oh, this is great. And it was $4.99.
Okay.
And you choose your color, you put your hands in, and it does your nails. And I was like, that's it. I don't like going to a salon. And then they tell me, oh, the fast option, which is just one coat, is 35 minutes. And I was like, okay, I don't have that time.
Whoa. That's insane. I feel like no one has that time. Like, what's the value prop of the product if you're like the salon would be quicker?
Yes. I mean, at that point, I'm going to go to a salon and at least I get to chit chat too.
Yeah. 100%. Interesting. I didn't see that one. That's cool though. If they can like cut down the time to 5 minutes.
Yeah. And give me the full thing with the two coats. But from a show perspective, so, leaving the technology aside for a second, was there something that kind of surprised you? If you couple, what your fellow creators might have told you and your experience, were there something that kind of jumped at you?
Yeah, I didn't know that a lot of it takes place at hotels. So for anyone that doesn't know, like there's like Las Vegas Convention Center. I remember the first night I got there, I had like a cocktail night with CES, and they were like Eureka Park, North Hall, West Hall. I was like, guys, like I don't know anything. Like, I didn't even know what happened at the convention center until I got there. Like I thought it was, I don't even know where I thought it was, but the convention center, for anyone that doesn't know, is like the main area, and then you have Central Hall, which would be like all the traditional brands like Panasonic, Samsung, Netflix had a booth, and then West Hall is like newly renovated, and that's where like John Deere and a lot of the automotive stuff was. And then North Hall seemed like health tech. But I didn't realize that like that's the convention center, but then all the companies like do private events like the Venetian or other hotels in the surrounding area.
Yeah, I laughed when you said it because that was exactly my first thing back in the day when I attended my first one. And setting up meetings, if you're not aware of the distances, is a challenge, because I remember the first year I missed half the meetings that I set up because I just didn't factor in that it takes you, even half an hour to just walk out of the hotel through the casinos. So
yeah, and then the Uber situation is like wild because on like day one it was like 2-minute Ubers. I was like, wow, Vegas is great. And then as like the convention starts, it's like 30-minute Uber wait times. They don't drop off in the same location, so you almost have to like give yourself double the time to get anywhere.
That's right. Did you see anything in the, and I think I'm leading the witness a little bit,
okay,
in the crowd and from a stand perspective that stood out to you?
Ooh, I was surprised how few media there is in comparison to like industry attendees. So I think it's like 6% media. And then because of that, like a lot of the booths are like really incentivized as you walk by with like a media badge to pull you in.
Yeah.
Which I thought was kind of cool. But are you thinking of something else?
No, well, on that one, yes, we had a new person coming in on our team, and the first thing I said, I was like, do not make eye contact as you walk. Unless you really want to talk to someone, don't make eye contact.
Because you will get pulled in.
Yeah, you get pulled in because they need warm bodies to, tell 100%. The story. No, I was curious, and I think it's telling that you didn't mention that. I was curious if you felt that it's still a male-dominated show.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I think it is, right? Like, but I guess I'm kind of used to that because I feel like every tech event ever is male-dominated unless there's like an intentional push for it. Where like when you and I go, I feel like we're maybe like 2 out of like 10 people. Sometimes it's more, but in general, I think it's still pretty skews male-dominated.
Absolutely, yeah, and it's kind of. It's sad that we say, oh, I didn't notice this because I'm used to it, which is true,
Yeah.
And I have a question for you in a second right around that. We talked about sustainability briefly, but I want to go back to something that was actually on the show floor, which was AI. AI was everywhere, a bit more tamed in the keynotes. I think there was more realism on the keynotes, but on the floor, everything had AI on it. Were you expecting this kind of AI washing to some degree?
A little bit, because it feels like at a lot of the keynotes, the companies will be like, and we're doing it with AI. And we're like, wait, but this feature existed like 3 years ago. So was it AI back then and you were like an early adopter? Or like, is it actually not AI? But I don't know. I think like with technology, one of the things I think about in my videos, that you were mentioning is I like try to make them relatable to like the average person, ideally. So like I hope the tech enthusiast loves it. They're like the audience that I care the most about. But then I also hope that like the average person can find it informative. And so I think these companies are like, all right, average people care about AI. If we position the feature this way, maybe more people will care. But it may be getting overused to the point that then like it's just a term and no one cares.
Yeah. One of the things that I personally I find more difficult with CES is, and obviously we had the break of COVID, but even before then, is the fact that the technology cycles are longer now. And so back in the day, you would go in January to see products that would come out later in the year, and the jump, if you like, in features and ROI on the delivery was higher.
Yeah.
You mentioned that, it's hard nowadays to maybe see more of an incremental value or change to a product, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the impact on our daily life is not useful. And that's what you try and get out of those products. Did you see something that kind of fits this narrative?
Ooh, well, Garmin had a booth that was really cool. So I reviewed like a lot of like smart tech and like wearables, because I feel like as phones plateau, wearables are where we're seeing like this next innovation. So obviously Rabbit was also released at the event. And I think the Garmin stuff is interesting because it like their core base is like endurance athletes, but the products are now like getting better looking and having more features that I think daily life impacts are huge. And I actually just talked with Google recently about, this wasn't announced at CES, but they had like a huge booth. All of their safety features, which I think especially for women are like, for everyone it's great, but like especially for women at night when you're running, there's like an ability to have the watch notify people if you don't hit a checkpoint. Right. I think like small quality of life features like that, like maybe it's not that the hardware is getting overhauled, but they're adding features that make your daily life better, that actually matter more maybe than like an increase in like processor speed that we would have had like 5 years ago.
I agree, and I think that there's a lot of that value. And if I think at one product that was like that in 2023 was the iPhone, where from year to year there wasn't like huge change, but some of the features that they added really make a difference day to day. And I also feel that sometimes we forget that people don't necessarily go from version to version every year, but they upgrade something that is 3-4 years old, and so they will see more of the change that maybe we notice in the market.
100%. Yeah, I think that's like, you have to really have empathy for the person that's watching the video, because you are like, I feel like we're like so in tap with like every single piece of tech. We have like the privilege of doing that, but obviously the person on the other end does not normally.
That's right.
They're going to notice it a lot. Like actually for me, I was still using, or I actually still in like an Intel MacBook Pro, and I just bought the new M3, and that's like my computer's from like 2019, so it's going to be a major quality difference. Yep. But if you look at like M2 versus M3, it's like pretty minor. And so like year to year tech is iterative, but if you expand the timeline a little bit and zoom out, then it's like major improvements over 4 years, 5 years, which is a pretty short amount of time, I feel like.
Yeah, which is the average cycle for an average consumer.
Yeah. Wait, what about you? What was like is there a piece of tech there that was like, ooh, this is going to like genuinely affect my day to day?
Ooh, I was intrigued by Rabbit. And so if people haven't seen that, is a little box with a camera, with a chipset, and is basically an AI in your pocket where you interact with the device, asking the device to do things for you. That can be from, ordering lunch to calling an Uber for you. The caveat with that is in the cloud, and they need to have all your logins for everything to be useful. So on one end, I was like, ooh, I'm really intrigued by this idea of really having a true personal assistant that does things for you. But then, I guess, I don't know if it's the skeptic or just I'm thinking,
like, okay, smart.
Where do you have my data? You have all my logins. 100%. How secure is my data? How else are you going to use my data? Right? Is a small startup. And so I think with AI, there's a big play for trust, and, who consumers are going to trust is going to be really interesting. We know from data that we have that Apple and Microsoft are among the most trusted brand because they tend not to monetize the data directly of the consumers. Facebook and Google, not so much. So it'd be interesting when you're saying, okay, this is an amazing technology, but I don't really know the brand.
Yeah, there's a quote that I love, which is like, don't be the best, just be the favorite. And I feel like that's like super relevant to this because it's like, even if this is an objectively better product than like an Apple version, I would trust the Apple version more because I'd be like, oh, like I'm okay with them having all my data.
Correct.
But like a small startup, I would be a little bit like, okay, I need to know exactly what's going on. Like, what are the firewall security precautions? And also, I think when you're a smaller startup, there is always a question of like, are you going to use the data to monetize? Because when you're Apple, like, you don't need to use data to monetize. But it did look cool, and they're undercutting a lot of the competition price-wise, which is interesting.
Correct. Yeah, and I think it's more approachable because of a design that they chose that humane, that maybe is is a bit more foreign from a day-to-day use even for early adopters. So this idea of AI that is decoupled from the phone, I think is started to take on as one of the trends. So I'll be interested to see where we go with that.
Yeah, 100%. Do you think that, I don't know, like it goes back to like the question, is it a product or a feature? I don't have an answer for it, but do you think that like most consumers need to buy something like that, or will it just be like Siri or Google Assistant get better and then it's in the phone?
I think part of it is the trust, and part of it is how far the assistant can go. I'm always skeptical about things that now we're so dependent on our phones that having something else that I need to carry worries me. If I go back looking at, and this date, I'm going to date myself, the first camera phones were modules, right? It was Sony Ericsson had an amazing camera, but it was something that you were attaching to the phone.
Yeah.
The amount of times I forgot the stupid thing at home because I would take my phone, but then I forget the attachment.
Yeah.
And so I think will I always remember? Will I always take it with me? And I think the answer is it depends what the value is, right? If it becomes as valuable as the phone, we never forget the phone.
Yeah. And if we do, we're like willing to go back. It's like when you go to the
back,
gym,
like
and
I forget my child, it's okay, but I'll go back to get my phone. Yeah.
100%. Yeah. It's crazy. Like what tech becomes vital. Like the headphones, for example, if I like go to the gym, my headphones are dead. The workout is so much worse. And like, it feels so much more grueling. Whereas the headphones are, I'm like pumping myself up. And like other things like, will the AI thing get so good that we depend on it in our daily life? And then if that's the case, then I think like we'll take any form factor. And also I think people have shown that they're willing to give up privacy for convenience.
Oh, totally.
So like if it ends up being highly convenient, then I think people will be more than happy to give up privacy.
1000%. And this has always been the case. I mentioned briefly sustainability, and I know that you're very passionate about it, but I was actually surprised that there wasn't much.
At CES?
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, honestly, I was so like just trying to see everything that I didn't look a lot for it. I did see the word a couple times at different booths, but I don't know. Was there any like companies just there for sustainability or no?
No, there were a couple of features within products that were called out as being sustainable, either because they were power efficient or because they were helping you with things like, water consumption, if you were talking about smart something in the bathroom. But there was definitely less talk about sustainability that I was expecting, and I'm willing to bet that as I go into Mobile World Congress would be very different just because of where the regulation is in Europe versus the US. And so I think that will be more center stage than here.
What do you think are like the biggest like relegation differences between the US and Europe? Are they just like more ahead of us?
It's just that regulation is much stricter. And so companies in Europe have had to start really looking at their supply chain and sharing their data more openly. I think international companies have, like GDPR for privacy, Europe was ahead, and then international companies had to basically abide by that standard, even if they were based in the US.
Yeah, it's kind of like USB-C.
Yes, correct. And that would be the same. And I think that is in general, everything in the US get politicized. In Europe, it does not. And so things get done faster than here.
Interesting. Yeah, that is wow, because I actually do think it's one of the most pressing issues. It kind of goes back to the like convenience privacy thing.
Yeah.
Because we don't feel the impact of it in the moment, we're often not like really pushing for it. Whereas like if something's inconvenient, I feel like we notice right away, so we'll take the convenience. If our privacy is taken, we don't notice right away, so we make that risk. Same thing with like sustainability. I feel like people over optimize for like quickness and newness, and because we don't get the impact right away of that being bad, it's really hard to change the public perception unless you have like a rule against it, like the USB Type-C thing.
That's right. I mentioned early, or I asked you, from a woman creator perspective at CES, I saw you. I missed your panel at the Female Quotient at the Equality Lounge, but I watched it on LinkedIn, and I will add for our audience in the show notes the link to the recorded panel. And it was fascinating, as you were talking about the creator part of thing. But what did you think about the idea of having like a safe space for women and underrepresented group? Because there were a lot of, men of color, for instance, I attended last year as well. And it was like the energy was so amazing. And it was a safe place to really openly talk. And obviously, the CEO makes it really easy to be open and direct because that's how she is. So how do you look at something like that? Is it good, or should we move away from dedicated spaces for women or, people of color or LGBTQIA plus, and really push the whole of tech?
Ooh, that is such a good question. I don't know. I think that the answer is like really complex because you have pros and cons of both. Like if you kind of like segregate the group, then now you're creating like an us versus them, which is maybe not helpful. But then also, oftentimes, if you're like a minority group, you have like a level of shared experience that the other people don't have, and then it's kind of like comforting and maybe insightful to talk to people about it. So I think it can be both. I feel like I personally got lucky when I started my career that every creator that I met, both male and female, were like amazing to me and so welcoming and nice that it was never really like feeling like, I guess, like sexism within this space from like a people I worked with perspective. There definitely were comments at times where it would be like, I'm not going to like trust his opinion because you're a female. And I'd be like, what is going on? Like, especially because I grew up, I think, kind of in the generation where things started to shift a little bit because I'm 22. And so like for the first half of my life, it was like there was maybe like a level of like misogyny or things like that, and there still is. I'm not like I think every group has its issues, but it definitely changed a lot where it was like more like empowerment and like talk about it. And so I think my experience is probably a lot better than it would have been like 30 years ago, which is exciting, and probably in large part because of those groups and talks and stuff. So I think it's hard to say if they're like an all or nothing. We probably need both.
Yeah, I tend to agree. On one side, and especially, I'm sure you have the same as a woman creator, that oftentimes you're asked because you're a woman. And it was the same for me in my career, especially as you mentioned, 20 years ago, it would be 20 years ago, they wouldn't even ask me because I was a woman.
Okay, so it improved a little bit, and then you were like,
then it became, okay, we need a woman, so can you please come? And then, and over time it is really, okay, yes, we need diversity, but we want you because of your knowledge or because of whatever. And so you take those opportunities, and I agree with you that it shouldn't be an either or, that we shouldn't be talking about diversity and inclusion because it shouldn't be a problem, but it is. And so having safe spaces like the Equality Lounge is important. What would you say to a young creator looking, and by the way, I think that YouTube creators are one of the most amazing communities I have ever experienced as far as being welcoming and supporting and really working. Yeah.
Truly. Yeah, I think it's like the only, like, I was at a dinner with YouTube 2 nights ago. And so it kind of like comes in from every front. I think YouTube's incredible, and like they enable all these amazing experiences, and they're really supportive. And everyone that works at YouTube, like I love them, really good friends with a lot of them. So like they foster positivity and work ethic and like all these great things. And then on the creator front, all the creators share this interest in tech that we have. And so like you're immediately bonded. It's like when you know that you like have grown up in the same hometown as someone, but even like more significant because you're actively choosing this, whereas like the hometown, it just happens to you. This like everyone loves the thing. And so I think baseline that. And then I also think like the job of like a career or analyst is like so unique and different than the public that if you didn't have someone to talk to about it, you would have to figure out so much on your own. It would feel kind of overwhelming. So it's like almost like closest by necessity, but then also by excitement. So for a new creator, I would say, I think what's really valuable is just like going to the events because it's a pretty small community. Like even though there are a lot of people that make tech videos online, like you kind of get to know the group pretty quick if you're at the event. So if there's any opportunity to go to like a public event, like I know like sometimes like OnePlus will like let fans come to their keynotes. That's a really cool opportunity to meet people, or CES. And then I think like posting stuff online is just like the ultimate serendipity for getting things to happen in life. Like you make something one time and then anyone around the world can see it. And so I would just start, like take action, because oftentimes like Casey and I has said before that like every plan seems great until you like try to execute on it. And like, I think that's so true. Like you have to just do it to then know like, oh, I thought that was going to be easier than it was. Like, let me learn. And I think you'll learn a lot more by like iterating and meet a lot more people by just like putting things online versus just thinking about it.
Yeah. Do you read your comments?
Yeah, I love the comments.
Do you read I do too.
Okay, but not as
still learning to walk away from certain answers. So it's like, okay, I read it. Okay, I internalize it and I move on. I'm not going to interact.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, that is something I think about a lot. Like I feel blessed like thus far that the comment section is like 99.9% positive. But I feel like the comments that bother you the most are like the ones that you kind of think are true. Whereas like if you like fundamentally don't think it's true, you're like, all right, whatever. Like, but the ones that like you're like, oh, they're kind of right. Like I should have done better at this. Like that's the type of comment that is bothersome. But then I also can like, I think it can like push you to move forward in a way. Some comments are just like mean and bad and whatever. But like a lot of the comments, even if they're like worded terribly, can be like really constructive. Like I remember I recorded a video like beginning of my career, like maybe a year in, and it sounded terrible. And there was like a comment that was like, it sounds like you're talking into a banana right now. Like, this is so bad. I was like, not like in the moment, oh no, video, like I wanted people to love it. But like the audio quality sucked and I needed to hear it to get better. So sometimes I feel like you can like reframe the comments as like people on your team almost and like pushing you forward, because sometimes like the people closest to you won't tell you what you need to hear.
That's true.
So it can be helpful.
Our time flew by, but before I let you go, I want to know, what is the product that you're most excited about for 2024?
Oh, God, that is such a good question. Wow. Okay. Maybe just because it's like top of mind, but I'll say Apple Vision Pro is coming out next month. I'm like excited and terrified at the same time. Like we're getting close to the future, maybe where like we all have glasses on and everything is like augmented. But I'm excited about it because I think even just on like a level of how much innovation went into like the eye tracking. I read a really interesting article from one of the scientists that worked on it. And she was saying like before you make a decision, like your pupils dilate a little bit. And so the Vision Pro is able to even like detect sometimes before we consciously know what we want to do. And that's like fascinating to me. So Vision Pro, I would say, is like maybe like the biggest leap forward in like just purely hardware in a while. But what do you think?
And well, it's funny that you mentioned that because obviously, as always, Apple wasn't at CES, but they broke the news of availability during CES because they're always very good at timing. And so, yes, Vision Pro is definitely top of mind. I'm also curious to see where foldable screens are going to go, both on the PC side and the phone side. There were a couple of prototypes on the show floor at CES from Samsung Display showing like a flip form factor that flipped both ways, which puts a lot of stress on the glass, of course, but makes things more interesting as to what you can do with it. There was also a PC that Intel showcased that had two screens. And so you would unfold it like you do a normal laptop, and then you unfold it one more time. So you have the two screens. So things like that might get you to change your workflow, but in a way that doesn't put the the strain of really rethinking or relearning how you work.
100%. Yeah, that is exciting. And I also feel like there's a lot of software stuff in the pipeline too. Like hardware is tangible, but a lot of AI stuff is going to come out this year that I think will change the way we do work.
Oh, absolutely. And I think that AI is going to impact everybody, whether you're doing it consciously or unconsciously. We will all be impacted by it. So is exciting, is, for some people is a little nerve-wracking. Yeah. But definitely a lot of change coming. I'm extremely grateful that you found the time to come and talk to us today.
I'm so honored to be on. Thank you, genuinely. And you're an incredible host. This flew by. I feel like it's been 5 minutes. So thank you so much.
Where can people find you if they are not familiar with you?
On YouTube, it would be youtube.com/NBT Jacqueline. Actually, on any platform, it's that. But if you just look up my name and/or Nothing But Tech, it should come up.
That's awesome. And I look forward, I'm assuming that later this week, I will see you somewhere.
Yes, 100%. We'll be there. I'm excited.
All right. We'll see you soon then. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in.